Recently, a bunch of film fanatics in the US ranked the all-time superpowers of action heroes. So I'm going to ask for a bit of audience participation here. We're going to vote on what you think the number one superpower was of all time. I'm going to give you the top three in no particular order. So first up, the first superpower that made the top three was the ability to move objects with your mind. You remember that film Matilda, right? Second superpower was element control. So the ability to control the weather and to control the elements around you. A little bit like Storm does in X-Men. Got that? The third superpower that made the top three was telepathy. So the ability to control emotions and read minds with just a single thought. So, show of hands, who thinks that the top superpower was to move objects with your mind? Show of hands. Unpopular, interesting. Who thinks it was number two, controlling elements? Okay, hands down. And who thinks it was number three, telepathy? Interesting. Well, I can actually surprise everyone. The number one voted superpower was element control. So that's good news for all of the Halle Berry fans in the building. But look, as children, we dream of having these superpowers, these fantasy superpowers. But by the time we become adults, we forget that we've got superpowers. We've got real-world superpowers. And the good news is we can strengthen these superpowers. And okay, we might not be able to read minds, although my girlfriend sometimes expects me to be able to. But I'm talking about superpowers like leadership, creativity, time management, empathy. These are real-world superpowers that all of us in this room possess. And we can build these superpowers to do amazing things. These superpowers help us develop as students. They help us build careers. These superpowers help us come up with technologies that transform the way that we live our lives. And they also help us invent vaccines that save them. You see, the problem is that the way in which we develop these superpowers in today's world is very often one size fits all. And there's a lot of untapped potential being left on the table. You see, the challenge is that we as human beings are often unaware of exactly the area that we need to work on in order to improve. And I'm a product of this system. But I've also been fortunate enough to experience a slightly different model. And my experience in going through this different model to develop my skill set and my superpowers has sought me to seek out new ways to develop my superpowers over time. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you all today. My hope is that you'll learn some new approaches, but at the very least, I want us all to leave today challenging the models and the ways in which we develop as individuals. See, I grew up in the UK to South African parents, and I went to the local all-boys comprehensive school. Now, thinking about my experience at school, there was very little opportunity to reflect on what I was genuinely good at. And as a result of that, I wasn't aware of what my superpowers were. As I began school, my classmates were brilliantly unique. You know, I went to school with people who were amazing at music. I went to school with other folks who were incredible at arithmetic and numbers. But I felt that superpowers were often overlooked, and individual brilliance was very rarely rewarded. So I decided to do something about it. I was fortunate enough that round about the age of 14, I had the opportunity to work with one of the UK's top performance coaches. Now, if you think about the journey of improving our superpowers and developing as individuals, by the time we get to school, we're treated as one size fits all. And this was really frustrating for me. And by the time I made it to university, I didn't have a clue what I was going to study, but you do get a choice of what you want to study, so I chose economics. You can ask any economics graduate out there why they chose economics, and I'm pretty sure the reason they'll give you is because they didn't have a clue what they wanted to study. But at university, I still felt frustrated by this one-size-fits-all approach of formal learning. And then you arrive at the world of work. And again, no matter what our superpowers are, no matter what our experiences are, we go through a one-size-fits-all onboarding journey. And we're treated very much as just a number. And it really was that frustration that led me to start building businesses. And I rebelled against that model, and I lent in to ways in which that I could actually develop as an individual. Now, my childhood dream was to play professional sport. And at a young age, my parents got divorced. But something interesting happened at that time. I also got selected to play for the county golf squad. And this is where that performance coach that I spoke about in the beginning, I had an opportunity to work incredibly closely with him. I'm going to refer to him just as coach. But coach played a role really as a second father to me during these challenging years when I was figuring out how to become the man of the house, so to speak. Coach's philosophy contrasted this one-size-fits-all model that we had come to know so well. And what Coach did was he developed the human first, and then he developed the athlete. And Coach and I did some tremendous work together over time. But he opened my eyes up to a new model that we could use to understand our superpowers and realize our own potential. So Coach's philosophy was pretty simple. It broke down into 3 areas. Firstly, you've got to understand your superpowers. So Coach would shine a light on the areas that we were really strong, and he would also help inform next steps and next areas for us to work on so that we could realize our potential. And step 2 for Coach's philosophy was then he would continuously help us add new skills to our repertoire to help make our superpowers stronger. But he wouldn't treat us all as one. He wouldn't get us to swing the club in the same way or play the game in the same way. He would personalize his approach with each of us to help us tap into that unique genius that we all have. And then thirdly, Coach helped embed a growth mindset. And every day, as we arrived up to the training ground, it was about 1% marginal improvements. How can you become 1% better today? And the powerful thing about this simple philosophy is that with marginal improvements, we massively underestimate the impact that improving at something 1% a day can have. And I got really hooked on this approach. And through my work with Coach over the years, I was able to compound my improvements over time. And I was able to realize a dream and play professionally. So I played a season on the IGT Tour down in South Africa. And this for me was really validation that this model worked, that there was another way. And my experience as an elite athlete had taught me what personal and professional development was really all about. So my golf career came to an end. I then moved into the world of business, and I took with me this philosophy that Coach had instilled in us. And I started using it in a business context, and I realized that I started to develop skills at a faster pace than many of my peers, but I was still coming up against this frustration of this one-size-fits-all model that I felt was holding me back. So I decided to do something about it and build a business and start working on leaning into all of the learnings that Coach had given us over the years. And I noticed a couple of things happening in the workplace. Number one, employees were taking longer and longer to get up to speed. And secondly, particularly younger employees were often leaving their roles because they just didn't feel like they were invested in to develop their own superpowers. So what we did is we took this model and these principles that Coach had taught us, and we built a technology around them. So what we've been able to do is, back in 2019, we started with sales teams. Now, if you think about it, sales is the lifeblood of any business. But despite this, there's no formal sales education in the market. As a result, the skills gaps in sales teams are huge. And it's really hard for sellers to build self-awareness of what their own superpowers are and where they need to develop. So what we've been able to do is to take the principles from Coach that he taught us at an early age, build a technology that combines some psychometric testing to understand your unique strengths, and we also integrate and combine that with data from the tools that these sellers are using, like your CRM systems. We're able to then visualize the superpowers of every seller in the organization and help those salespeople track their improvements over time. Now, because we're profiling every seller and using data, we're then able to move away from this one-size-fits-all model of development to something that's highly personalized. And I'm going to share with you some key learnings that we've had on this journey so far. First up is engagement. Now, what we've learned is that engagement increases when you personalize the recommendations that you're providing to your employees. So these sellers now know exactly where to spend their time developing and improving that's going to move the needle and make a difference to their performance. Secondly, what that means is that we're able to add an element of personalization to their development journeys and offer really bespoke approaches to helping them tap into their superpowers and realize their potential. But not only that, we've also been able to drive consistency. Now, anyone who's tried to improve at anything knows that consistency is the hardest part. We've been able to bring in that 1% marginal gains philosophy from Coach by using technology. So we've been able to use alerts and notifications to help sellers understand when and how they can fit development into the flow of their working day. And what's been fascinating is we've had over 170,000 data points collected already on sales competencies. And we've been able to look at what are the competencies that high performers have in common. What's particularly fascinating about this is that those competencies are evolving over time. So right now, the top 3 competencies for high-performing salespeople are negotiation, growth mindset, and product knowledge. But if we're to head into a recession or a slowdown, we expect these competencies to continue evolving and changing. What this means is that we've now created a global standard for seller competencies. So aspiring salespeople who are entering their careers can start to understand what are the areas that I need to develop for success. Our work with this cohort of salespeople so far has generated some really promising results. So far, sellers that have access to personalized development are able to ramp up to full productivity 28% faster. Salespeople, as a cohort, as a profession, typically have itchy feet. They change roles every 12 to 18 months. And it's a big problem for organizations who are trying to grow. We've been able to reduce attrition and improve the tenure of this cohort by over 30%. But sales is just the start. What if we applied this technology and this new model for workforce development to teams right across the organization? What if we took personalized development and made it available to students and teachers and politicians? We all have unique superpowers. And there's an unbelievable amount of untapped potential available if we can only help people realize it. I took inspiration from a sporting context. If elite athletes are developing themselves in this way, then why aren't we doing it for our careers? We all have unique superpowers, and we've been dreaming of superpowers since we were kids. The UN predicts that by 2030, there's going to be 67 million unfilled jobs due to talent shortages and skill shortages. Now, if we're going to realize the maximum potential from the superpowers that we all have, we're going to need to challenge the system and figure out new models for how we develop ourselves. There's a massive opportunity for us all here to explore these new models, and the progress that we've made so far is testament that it can be done. My hope is that all of you can pursue these alternative models for development, and we can move away from this one-size-fits-all approach to something that's much more personalized. And if we're going to realize our potential as a human race, personalizing the way in which we develop our skills is going to be crucial in solving some of the biggest challenges that lie ahead of us. Thank you very much.